Well, apparently teams think the trade deadline is today, but what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another live stream here on Ranger Central, and this is not Ranger related news, but I'm going live because it is a big trade in the NHL, and because when these type of trades break, I want to go live for them. And also, no other hockey channel is live right now, at least that I saw in my sub box. So I figured I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go live to talk about this trade while no one else is, as the Florida Panthers have acquired Seth Jones at 25% retained and a fourth round pick in exchange for a first and Spencer Knight. This is a huge trade early before the deadline. So I'm curious to see, how many trades are going to be saved come the trade deadline, as we're already seeing the trade start to unfold, which is a little bit annoying. But before we jump into everything, leave a like on your way into the live stream, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, and if you're a hockey fan, Ranger fan, if you don't like the Rangers and you love to hate watch the Rangers, I'm the channel for you, because you can talk garbage to me all you want when the Rangers lose. It's a fun time for everyone, so be sure to, of course, do that. But yeah, I mean, this is just a massive trade, and I will give my unbiased opinion because I have no hate bias, love bias towards either of these teams. And what I said on Twitter when I saw this trade, win-win. I think this is a win-win trade for both teams, and it's fairly obvious my reasoning why. But I'll give my reasoning yet again as to why. And the reason is because of the fact that Seth Jones goes into Florida, who needs help on the blue line, and they could put Matthew Tkachuk on LTIR to make the cap work. There is no harm, no foul. And then you add your defenseman, Eblad, could walk in the offseason, and you get a draft pick. And the question probably comes in, well, why would Seth Jones, or why would the Panthers take Seth Jones' cap and everything, considering the fact that, again, he's not been the best defenseman throughout his career, especially since signing that contract in Chicago. One, he played with Chicago for a while, which definitely does affect your playing results. Number two, 25% of the cap is retained there. And number three, the Florida Panthers just make everyone that goes to that organization turn into the second coming of the greatest hockey players. So I wouldn't be surprised if Seth Jones goes there and ends up being the second coming of Brian Leetch all of a sudden, because that's just the way this thing works with the Panthers, who are a very smart organization, as they just won the Stanley Cup and probably are the favorites to go back to the finals from the Eastern Conference as of today. So I love this trade for the Florida Panthers in that regard. And I know, again, Seth Jones, a controversial defenseman in terms of some people love him. Some people think he is overpaid, overrated. I think that he is overpaid and overrated, but at the end of the day, I think that, the Florida Panthers, if there's any team that could right the wrong here of Seth Jones, I think they are that team. And I like this trade for them a lot. And again, I think the Blackhawks did very good in this trade as well. You get a first round pick, which, you stockpile them, and there's a condition on that draft pick as well, to my knowledge. But it's a 2026 first round pick. So Chicago's draft selections are looking like their own, Toronto's for this year, and then they have two first round picks for next year as well to help them, of course, in their rebuild. And they acquire a young goalie in Spencer Knight, which is definitely helpful considering the fact that Peter Mrazek has not been the greatest there. Laurent Brossoit has been injured for pretty much the entire season. Not pretty much. He has been injured the entire season. And then on top of that, Arvid Soderblom, he's got reps, but he just does not look like an NHL goalie. He's been better this year compared to the previous few seasons. But at the end of the day, you get an upgrade in Spencer Knight in goal. And you might be asking, well, Florida downgraded in goal a little bit there. Well, at the end of the day, when you're paying Sergei Bobrovsky as much money as you are, you figure out who the backup goaltender is. And Spencer Knight was having the better year between the two goalies. But they do have Chris Drieger down in the AHL if they want to just call him up, which he's not having the best of years, but you call him up temporarily and maybe you target a goalie at the trade deadline, which is possible. Maybe the Rangers potentially send Jonathan Quick there. Who knows? That could be something that happens. So I like this deal for both teams personally. I think that both teams got what they really need. You get futures if you're Chicago, and you get help to win now if you're the Florida Panthers, in terms of a team that, again, going for it from the Eastern Conference, potentially being the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. And it would be the second time in very recent memory that a Florida team goes back to back as the Panthers just made the trade official as well, which I'm going to see if I could find the conditions on that draft pick. But let me know in the chat right now what you guys think of this trade. Do you guys think it's a W for the Panthers? Do you guys think it's an L for the Panthers? Do you think it's a W for the Hawks, L for them? Or do you think that both teams made out well in this trade? Let me know your thoughts on that one. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about this trade. But yeah, personally for me, I think that this is as win-win as it gets, but that is just my opinion on that entire thing there. So let's see what you guys are actually, you know what, before I look at the conditions, let me put a poll for the chat to give their opinion on this trade. So let's see who won the trade. So we'll go with Florida, Chicago, and then we will add a both teams option as well. So let's see what you guys think in the chat about this trade for both parties. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. So let's see if I could find the conditions now on this pick, unless someone in the chat has the conditions in the chat. Does not look like it. All right. So anyway, let me see if I could find it on Twitter real quick, because here we go. No, that's not the conditions. I thought Dave Pagnotta was actually giving useful information. Silly of me. Uh, let me see if I could find it anywhere. Like, does anybody at all have the conditions on this trade, or on this pick, rather? Man, NHL insiders, nothing like it. But it's crazy how the deadline is just approached out of nowhere, in terms of the fact that it was just radio silent for the past 24 hours. And then out of nowhere, we get 3 trades today, which is pretty cool, because on top of that as well, of course, there was the trade with Gus Nyquist going to Minnesota, returning to Minnesota, as he played a grand total of 3 games there at one point. So yeah. Um, Let me see if I could find the conditions. So here we go. Pierre LeBrun. The condition on the first round pick in the Jones trade, it's a 2026 first going to Chicago, but if Florida ends up not having that pick, then it moves to a 2027 first pick, which goes to the Blackhawks instead. So what does that even make sense? How do you not have your pick? Okay, so I guess I guess the way it works is Florida could still move their 2026 first next year, and then they have the option of giving Chicago the 2027 first instead, is what I'm gathering from this. So that's, I don't know, that puts me in a mind pretzel there. That's a weird one, but let me bring in Matt, who's going to join in. What's going on? What are your thoughts on the trade?
I think, kind of like we were saying in the group chat, I think it's fair for both sides. I think, listen, from Chicago's point of view, even though you're still retaining 25% salary for the next 5 years after this deal, or for the next 4 years, because it's year 3 of 8, you're still getting a large chunk of Seth Jones' salary um off your books. Because let's be honest, like, Seth Jones, he hasn't been the same player since, for his last couple years in Columbus, and then the first couple years of him being a Blackhawk. Like, he hasn't been the same defenseman that he was first coming into the league. So I think for Chicago, and the fact that they get a young up and coming goaltender in Spencer Knight, I think that's a W for them. And listen, for Florida's sake, even though, like I said, I'm not a fan of Seth Jones personally, and I don't think he's a great defenseman, but you're bringing in Seth Jones, and he's going to go probably, if I'm looking at the lineup right now, yeah, Daily Faceoff just updated. Right now, they have him. They have him on the second pair with Nico Mikkola. So Forsling and Ekblad as your first pair, Mikkola, Seth Jones is your second pair, and Schmidt and Kulkov is your third pair. I think putting Seth Jones right there on the second pair next to Mikkola and surrounding him with other talented NHL defensemen, I think that could work. And plus also the fact that we've seen Florida have had these reclamation projects in the past where, they bring in guys with not so great pass and then, they plug them into the system and then all of a sudden it works. And it helps, when you have a nice working system, when you have a good coach in Paul Maurice and you have other talented players surrounding you. Like I said, I'm not a fan of Seth Jones, but I think in this current situation, I think they could get the best out of him. And like you said, Florida, they're going for another cup. They're going for 3 straight cup finals appearances in a row and trying to do the first back-to-back since Tampa in 2021. So for them, it's a good trade. And I mean, I know the money right now is a little concerning. So you'd figure, is Matthew Tkachuk going to LTIR or is there another move they're gonna make? But yeah, I think like we were saying before, it's solid for both teams.
Yeah, they have to be putting Kachuk on LTIR because they're over the cap to begin with, and now they have to call up another goalie unless they have literally just no scratches at all and just rock with what they have because that's the only way they could fit within the cap if they don't put Kachuk on LTIR. But I'm sure that at this point, Kachuk's just probably like, hey, put me on LTIR and go get better at the deadline. I'll come back come the playoffs, which, would be cool if Jacob Trouba did that last year. Would have been very cool, but it's fine. But yeah, I think that Florida's not done. I mean, there's no way, especially if Kachuk goes on LTIR now, because then all of a sudden they're probably going to add another forward. They're going to add a backup goalie. I was saying before, maybe they're a destination for Jonathan Quick. Maybe we're helping them. Maybe we give them a package of Quick and Riley Smith to help them out. Who knows? But yeah, we'll see there.
But I think also the fact, like you said, with Kachuk on LTIR, yeah, sure, it sucks that he's probably going to be out for the rest of the year. But Florida's in a position right now where they're going to comfortably make the playoffs, and they have enough firepower regardless, even if Kachuk's on LTIR or not. And they're in a position where Florida's one of those teams where for them, I mean, and they showed it 2 years ago when they were the 8th seed in the East and they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Whether they start a series on the road or not, it doesn't matter. And even the same thing last year because the Rangers had the home ice advantage in the Eastern Conference final, and that didn't make a difference at all. Because Florida's just one of those teams where they're just gonna muck and grind you. It doesn't matter where the game is played. So yeah, for them, even like because I mean, even if they finish third in the division and Toronto and Tampa finish first and second in the division, I don't think to them personally matters. I think it's just they have that game, that mindset that once it's playoff time, doesn't matter where they play, doesn't matter who they play, they're going to be ready to come and play.
Oh yeah, 100%. 1,000,000%. And I saw someone ask in the chat, who's going to back up Bobrovsky now? I don't think Florida's concerned about that because at the end of the day, there's like 30 something games left. How many games realistically is whoever the backup's going to be, whether they call up Drieger or whether they acquire a backup? Realistically, how many more games is that backup goalie getting? Because Bobrovsky's going to get the playoff starts no matter what. I mean, you're not going to sit him and his $10 million on the bench to not be there. And I know they did in their first cup run to when they played the Vegas Golden Knights. I know that they didn't play Bobrovsky for all of those games, but at the end of the day, he's probably going to be the guy come playoff time because they probably think, well, he could turn it up. They'll probably acquire a backup goalie at the deadline, but I don't think they're that worried about who it is right now. And they're just going to push the chips and try and go for it this year, which is the right thing to do, which is what this is what we wanted the Rangers to do last year, where you put a guy on LTIR potentially, and then you make moves around the roster where you might move guys out that are currently on the team that might be beneficial, but come playoff time, you're a much better team because, if they traded Kakko last year, sure, it opens a hole in your bottom six, but you go out and then fill that hole by making another trade. So I'm sure that Zito has a plan in terms of that. He's probably one of the best GMs, if not the best GM in the sport right now. So yeah, I mean, we'll see where that goes, but
Yeah,
I just don't think they're too worried there.
Yeah, because I just checked Florida's roster. I mean, not roster. I checked their schedule. They got 21 games left, 5 back-to-backs.
Yeah, so they don't have to rely too much on having a backup goalie, which, and I get this point where you hope Bob then doesn't get hurt at that point, but I think at the end of the day, they're going to get a backup goalie. I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe they're a team that I was about to say Gibson, but Gibson has too much term for them to acquire him. But like I said, I mean Jonathan Quick could be an option for Florida now. Honestly, like I said, I think Jonathan Quick and Riley Smith could make sense in a package deal to Florida at this point because Florida needs help in their forward group in the middle six right now, and then they need a backup goalie. So that could make sense. We'll see if any of that happens, but they're not done for sure. There's no way they're done. So we'll uh we'll see what happens there. And thank you for the $5 here. A Train Cats fan here. Like that Jones is getting a change of scenery. Um, but not ready for or not for nights. He showed lots of flashes as a backup and lots better than Bob. Hope it works. Well, thank you for the $5, which we'll talk about the Chicago side of this trade as well a little bit, just because of the fact that I'm sure there are Blackhawk fans here that want to hear our thoughts on that. But I think this again, like I said, win-win trade. You get the best goalie now on the roster is Spencer Knight. I mean, he's been having a very solid year this year. I want to check the numbers exactly. 907. It did dip a little bit because I think he was above 910 at one point, but still a 907 save percentage, and he's still young as well. So there is the upside there, especially now that he's going to get a starting role and he get a first round pick for a guy who wanted out. I think Chicago did really good with this trade.
Yeah, no, like I mentioned, you get I mean, well, first of all, like I said, you get a lot of cap space off your books, and I know, like I said, they're still retaining 25% salary for, like I said, the next 4 to 5 years, which like it isn't ideal, but when you look at it, it's the same thing what San Jose did with Hurdle last year at the trade deadline because Hurdle had a bunch of years left on his contract, and Vegas didn't have the cap space to take on all of it, especially for the next coming years. So they cut a deal, and I still think San Jose did pretty good out of that deal in terms of asset wise. But and then you look at it, especially with the cap going up over the next couple of years, and there's going to be some significant jumps. I think that eating that amount of money, it's not going to be a terrible look like in the next 3 to 4 years. So yeah, like I said, for Chicago, you get your goalie of the future, Spencer Knight, and you get a first round pick for a guy who wanted out. And like I said, for me, wasn't even a great defenseman. So you win on two sides of this trade. And I think for Chicago again, who's still not there yet at a level where they're going to be competing for a playoff spot. They're still a couple years away, but the fact that like I said, they open up more cap space, they get they get another first round pick, they get their goalie of the future. I think it works out well for them.
Yeah, and that's a team also that their rebuild's been a little bit it's looking a little shaky right now, their rebuild, to be honest with you, because not a lot of the young talent is, taking the steps forward that you'd hope. Connor Bedard's he's been okay when you look at the point totals, but you still, you look at his game and there's still a lot to be desired in terms of how he plays on the other side of the puck. And then on top of that, when you, look at guys like Reichel, who's not playing that great right now, Colton Dock, he just came up. He's been okay. Nazer's been okay. Like really, their best player coming out of this rebuild so far has been Vlasic. So now that you get more tools, that helps. And just to go back to Jones, this is his card so far, courtesy of Jay Fresh, who tweeted it out.
That
So
defense.
yeah, which that has plummeted a lot this year. But like I said, I mean, playing on a better team is going to help with that. And on top of that, the Florida Panthers, knowing them, will just make him like prime Seth Jones. I mean that's just how it is with that team.
That's what they do. I mean, like I said, you look at a couple of other guys they had, like Oliver Ekman Larson. This guy, after leaving Arizona slash Phoenix, where he was one of their better defensemen alongside Keith Yandel, he goes up, ends up in Vancouver, and pretty much was a lost cause. And Vancouver buys him out, and you figure who's gonna pick him up, and then all of a sudden Florida picks him up, and then he's got a reclamation year last year in Florida, and he was one of their mainstays on the blue line last year alongside Forsling, Ekblad, and Montour, and one of the key reasons why they went all the way to the cup as a key guy both on the power play. Well, I mean the depth power play because I think he was on the second pair, and then overall just an overall puck mover. So yeah, if Florida knows anything about reclamation projects and how to fix defensemen and overall just players in general, it's them. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see Seth Jones turn into at least a semi-reliable defenseman.
Yeah, like if the Rangers made this trade, we would have been throwing shit and mad because
Mhm.
we don't trust them at all. But I don't know. The Panthers are just becoming, if they haven't already reached the status to most people's opinions, the Dodgers of the NHL, where guys just go there and their careers get fixed. Like Evan Rodriguez goes there, and all of a sudden, he's outperforming his contract heavily. Carter Verhaeghe just becomes a 40 goal scorer when he goes there. Sam Reinhart, he was already good, but he took an additional step forward once he got there. Sam Bennett revived his career there. And then, obviously the biggest example of it is Gustav Forsling, who was a waiver pickup of all things, and now is their best defenseman right now. So,
Yeah.
and that's another thing. I mean, if they decide to split up Forsling and Ekblad, they could easily make that switch with Forsling and Jones and then Mikkel and Ekblad. And I think that would work just as well. Like their top four, I mean, their entire decor looks good, like 1 to 6. Kulikov, I think, as a 6 is really good. Nate Schmidt's okay, but they could still add potentially maybe a 7th defenseman to split the time a little bit with Nate Schmidt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and Christy, I agree with you. I think that's overall. I think that's their plan. I think they're gonna let Ekblad walk, and then Jones is gonna be a long term replacement. Because it depends on what Ekblad's gonna want in the offseason. I think with him seeing the cap's gonna go up. I think, and plus the fact that he is a Stanley Cup champion. He's been a former top pick in the draft like over a decade ago, and he's been a consistent, really reliable defenseman over the last couple years. I think he's going to be asking for a lot, and I think probably Florida just sees that it's probably not going to be worth it in total in terms of both money and years that he wants, and they'll say, "Let's pivot to Seth Jones. We think we have the analytics department, and we think we have the coaching staff to fix him. We go for a cup again, and then we make that transition next year."
Yeah, and on top of that too, I mean, Ekblad's play has really dipped lately, and the other thing with him is that he hates being healthy. Like that's Ekblad's least favorite thing. So I think they look at this like, all right, well, Seth Jones, we're probably going to get a more durable defenseman on top of that, especially because Ekblad has so much mileage on him from all of the playoff hockey as well. So I think they look at this and say, well, all right, Seth Jones, yeah, I think he's a year older. Yeah, he's a year older, but I mean, there's a lot more mileage on Ekblad from all the playoff games, and he's also someone that has been, like I said, injured quite a bit. So I think they look at this like, all right, we're getting a guy that is more durable, less mileage on him, and is probably similar. And the only thing that Seth Jones, I would say, is maybe better at is I think he's slightly better in terms of moving the puck than Ekblad, but either way, I mean, it just makes sense. They let him walk, and then I'm sure that they'll find some reclamation project in the offseason on the free agent market to sign for less than what Ekblad wants, and then all of a sudden they'll be fine.
Yeah. Speaking of, I mean, let me see the free agent defense from next year. Let's see who the Florida Panthers are gonna target next year.
Oh, it's gonna be just some random guy that we haven't even thought of or heard of, like, or they might finally get the potential that we've been waiting on with Rasmus Ristolainen. Like maybe they'll trade for him and then just finally unlock the potential everyone thought was there. Um, yeah, they'll get just someone completely random. Like they'll fix Cody Ceci somehow and just make him a good defenseman. It really doesn't matter who it is.
Oh no, I got it. I know who they're gonna target. They're gonna get John Klingberg, and they'll turn John Klingberg back into a former All-Star puck moving defenseman.
That wouldn't surprise me either at all. Yeah. Yeah, they'll target like him or CC.
I'll give them major credit if they're able to turn Cody Ceci into a reliable shutdown defenseman. I'll give them some major credit there because that's almost like an impossible task.
Yeah, if they got CC and made him good, then you have to just
Tip your cap.
tip your cap and you have to put your hand up and say that all right, they are the Dodgers of hockey at that point.
Man.
I want to see what the poll is looking like though in the chat right now. Let's see. So Florida is winning or no, it's tied actually with Florida and Chicago both at 38. Both teams win at 25%. I'm surprised by that. I think that both teams won this, and I saw that someone said in the chat before an Instagram poll has people are voting Chicago won 85-15. I think that Seth Jones has just built up this reputation of just being like completely steaming hot garbage, and there was a point where he was like borderline unplayable and his contract was arguably the worst in the entire sport, but he's honestly been better since that time. Like when his first 2 years in Chicago were really rough though.
Yeah. Can GM just wait though? Like you got a couple more days. Just leave it till Friday.
I know, like
They
it's
gotta
gonna
do
be
this. Why
boring
are you gonna do
stream.
this now? Uh,
Like I said in our group chat, we need a hurdle trade
yeah.
of this year to happen to save us on Friday because it's not looking good, bruv. Because this was a trade that I was hoping would um be saved for the deadline.
Chris T, do you guys see the Rangers adding a depth D man?
They already have plenty
I
of those at
mean,
home. I don't think
yeah.
they're gonna
I mean,
add anymore.
they just brought in Calvin DeHaan, so and I know he's probably gonna slide into the lineup right now, but considering they still got Ruedel on the books, they got Calvin DeHaan. I know Fox is on IR right now, but he's gonna come back before the season ends. And then you guys still got Zach Jones who wasn't even playing. I just don't see where they add up another or where they add another depth defenseman. The only, I mean, if they were going to add a defenseman, it's like what we were saying for the forward core. You bring in a guy with term. I mean, if that was for me, I'd go to San Jose and I'd try to bring in Jake Wallman personally because even though he's not your typical number one pair defenseman. One, he's a lot better than Ryan Lindgren, and two, he could actually move the puck. And he's semi-reliable defensively. I know when you look at his defensive metrics, he hasn't been great this year, but if we're going to be fair, he's playing for San Jose, and San Jose is one of the bottom teams in the league. And I know we're not great defensively either, but I think Jake Wallman for me is the guy that I would target, and I would have loved him to get in the offseason considering San Jose got nothing. He was a cap dump to San Jose.
Yeah, I I honestly have no clue what the Rangers do the rest of the deadline outside of sell off guys like Riley Smith and Jonathan Quick because outside of that, this is the weirdest I have felt about a Rangers roster in forever. Like it's such a weird place because it's not like the past few years where they're definitive buyers or before that where it's like, all right, they're rebuilding, they're definitely gonna sell off assets. Now it's just like this weird phase of you don't know what the fuck is gonna happen. Like they could do some buying, they could do some selling. Ideally, I still want them to call Buffalo up and get McLeod or get Byram or both somehow if they could, but we'll see about that. I just don't think they're going to add though any more quote unquote depth defensemen, and if they do, it's because they're just taking guys like in the DeHaan deal or like with Brandstrom where they're just add-ons in
Oh,
the
yeah.
deal just to
Forget about Brandstrom too.
yeah, just for guys to get moved out. I think that's the only way that at this point they're gonna acquire any more quote unquote depth defensemen because right now they have a lot of guys that, like I said, profile in that regard. I mean, in Hartford right now, Ben Harper is there, Connor Mackey, Casey Fitzgerald, Chad Ruedel, Brandon Scanlon, all have played NHL games, and then Brandstrom too is down there. So they're pretty stacked in terms of having depth guys. It's just can we have guys that are actually able to play every night instead of that? So that's why I said like it's not even a joke anymore. They have like pretty much their entire decor is just depth defensemen at this point. It's a bit ridiculous, but Thank you for the $5, Jay Lewis. Do the Rangers trade Keandre Miller? He needs a pay cut and not a pay raise. Who becomes captain? Miller away, Trocheck home for the future, and future NYR targets. Thank you for the $5. To answer the first part of this, do I think they're going to trade Keandre Miller? No, I think if they do, it will be in the offseason. I've always felt that way. Do I think they should? Yes, considering what Seth Jones just got, considering what Ryan Lindgren got earlier today, and with how much GMs cream their pants over defensemen, I would move Keandre Miller to get better because I think you could get some good draft capital and you could still get some young roster players. And on top of that, you don't have to worry about overpaying Miller this offseason, like you're mentioning. But do I think it's going to happen? No.
Yeah, that's same with me. I would trade Keandre Miller personally right now because, like you said, you could get some decent value out of him just because what Florida, I mean, what Chicago just got for Seth Jones. I mean, they got a first round pick and a goalie of the future for him. So, and I know, listen, Seth Jones, like I said, isn't great defensively, but the fact that they still got that for him, and listen, Keandre Miller isn't great defensively either, but he's a lot younger than Seth Jones, and I think GMs could view him as one of those guys where needs a change of scenery, and I think maybe with better coaching and a better system change and overall just a team that develops better, I think that maybe you could get something better out of Keandre Miller. I'm not saying that if you put him into, like, let's see, like if Florida trade for him, I'm not saying if you put him there and he turns into a Norris caliber defenseman. No, but I think you could get better than him. But for me personally, we've just seen it. He's been up here for 5 years now. Like it hasn't worked. It's not going to work most likely. And for me, if like what the rumors are saying, his agent and him want a 5 year deal were anywhere between $6 and $6.5 million. I've just seen way too many inconsistency over the last couple years to say, yeah, I'm comfortable giving that deal. And yes, listen, the cap is going up, but just because the cap's going up doesn't mean I have to give dumb contracts to players who have been here for a while. Like the Rangers have to start smartening up. Will they? That's another question because we've been asking that for many years now, and they still haven't done it. But for me personally, yeah, I would look to trade them. But I think, like what Evan said, I think that's a move that's going to happen in the offseason. I think they'll try to negotiate a deal because he's an RFA in the offseason. And I think maybe Drury will try to, if he's still here, will try to get him to another bridge year deal. But I don't think Keandre Miller is willing to do another bridge year deal, considering that he just did one right now. I think he's looking for a long term deal, and if he wants that, I'm sorry. At that point, I'm trading you, and I'm getting whatever I can back for you.
Yeah, I just don't see a world where they're going to I don't know. I just don't see that personally. I just don't see a world where he gets moved until the off season potentially. And then the next part of your question, who becomes the captain? Right now, I don't know. It's probably going to be Trocheck if I had to make a guess. If I had to make a guess, it's going to be Trocheck. He was here before JT Miller. I think it's going to be him. And I think also it's a little more of a safer pick than JT Miller because with JT Miller, if things start to happen like they did in Vancouver with them, and that's your captain, it's gonna look very ugly. I think Trocheck, at least if he's the captain, he could balance the room a little bit better between that's his friend growing up and on top of that, could balance it with the fact that all right, I've been with teammates with these guys for a bit now, so Miller's got to relax. So I think Trocheck's going to be the captain next, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I just wouldn't choose a captain personally.
Oh, I
Yeah,
agree
I
with
think
well
that's that's
that I
brutal,
agree
bro.
with.
But probably yeah, it's gonna be Trocheck because I just don't see anyone else willing to step up because I don't think, like, sure, you could slap a C on somebody, but right now other than Trocheck, I don't think there's a guy right now that'd be willing to step up and take the C. Because even when Mika was good in his prime a couple years ago, you still never viewed him as like captain material. Because yeah, he was good, but you never saw him as that guy's being spoken out, holding guys accountable. So, but even though, like, for me, the only reason why I'm hesitant for Trocheck, he's had the down year this year. And listen, I'm not saying that he's gonna keep declining now until the last couple years of his contract, but the Rangers have, like, a safety net where I think it's next year or the year after where his no movement clause turns into a limited no movement clause, and the fact that he's only making $5.6 million with the cap going up, I think that's a fairly safe cap hit. So just in case you start to see a decline in his play, you could trade him. And that's the thing, like with the Rangers, do you want to now name another captain where in 2 3 years you could move him again?
It's the theme, though.
Yeah,
That's what I
I
was
know
about
it
to
fits
say.
I know it
It's the
fits the
theme.
theme, but do you want to do it again?
Yeah. No, I agree with that part, Tyree. I wouldn't name a captain, but it's it would fit the bill so perfectly that he would probably be gone in 2 or 3 years. Because
Oh,
after this year, he's got 4 years left on the contract, and starting next year is when it becomes a modified no trade clause. So it would probably fit the bill because after 2 years, you're probably going to see his play really regress, and
yeah.
it's gonna fit the bill perfectly. But and then in terms of the last part of your question here of Ranger targets, no one that would be a pure rental. And when I saw them linked to Brock Besser earlier, I said, please no, because I just don't think they're in a spot where it makes any sense at all to go out and get guys that are rentals. The only way that I'm fine with them getting guys who are pending UFAs is if it's a guarantee they are extending them. Other than that, only get guys with term. Look at pretty much anyone on Buffalo. Look at just like I said, anyone that has term on the deal, like we said, Wallman earlier too. That's my opinion of that. And outside of that, prospects and picks, like what Washington did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's same for me. Pretty much, like you said, anyone from Buffalo, McLeod, Tuck, Byram. Even though I like Byram, I don't know if it's the right fit for the Rangers because I think I know the Rangers need puck movers desperately because none of the guys on the blue line apart from Fox can move a puck up the ice. But if I'm looking at the Rangers, I need them to acquire a shutdown defenseman, like a number one guy. Like, and for me, like we watched them in the Four Nations, and I know it's not easy to pick a guy like this off a tree anywhere or find them, but the Rangers need a Jacob Slavin type defenseman. That number one shutdown guy where anytime he's on the ice, I mean, listen, no one's ever not going to go up going on the ice, but for the most part that whenever Jacob Slavin's on the ice, that Carolina is not conceding, and the Rangers they haven't had that type of guy. I know like Trouba is supposed to be that guy, but yeah, that didn't work out well after the first 5 games, and they really haven't had a really good shutdown D since Stahl and Girardi before they fell off. Like like even like Lindgren was solid for his first couple years, but he was nowhere near Slavin level. They
No,
need that type of defenseman. Like I mentioned, like I wouldn't be against getting Byram. I just think they need a different fit from Byram.
my reasoning more with Byram is my idea, and I put it on Twitter. Ideally, I would move Keandre Miller in a separate deal and then go out and just get like, picks, prospects, maybe a young roster player. And then I'd flip Schneider to go get Bowen Byram since I, I prefer Will Borgen on the bottom pair. And then if you construct your defense where you find that guy that you're describing to play with Adam Fox, then you have Byram, and then you sign a right shot defenseman to play with him. And then you sign a cheap left shot defenseman to play with Borgen. I like the look of that decor a lot more compared to what it would be if, they kept Keandre Miller and Schneider around, honestly.
No, that's fair. I think, like I said, for me personally, if they do both, if they bring in Bowen Byram and a really good shutdown number one pair guy to play with Fox, I'm cool with that. I just wouldn't like it per se if just Byram was the only addition, and then they slot
That
him
I
in
agree with.
because yeah, like Byram brings the offense, but this team needs a shutdown defenseman badly.
Yeah, and the problem is, I mean, looking at the free agent board this upcoming year, it is not going to be easy to find any of those guys at all. It is bad looking at this board. The one thing that is beautiful looking at the sport is that Colorado logo next to Lindgren's name now, but that's about it.
Is
Is
it
it
their problem
the
though?
guys that they were linked to? I remember was like what Gavrikov, Orlov, and there was one other guy that they might target as the left shot defenseman to play with Fox next year.
It was Gavrikov, Orlov, and who's the other guy?
I mean, Gavrikov would be a really good fit, in my opinion, for that left side. But the question that I have with Gavrikov
Is he
is
first pair
what
material?
that and is what he's doing more a product of LA system compared to anything else? Like, is he thriving because of the fact that LA system is just we're gonna play nails defensively and be a pain in the ass? Like, is it more that, or is it because Gavrikov is that style of guy? I'm not quite sure, honestly, but he's been respectable defensively even before going to LA. But I just don't know. Like, it does worry me that when you look at the metrics, it didn't skyrocket until he got to LA, where he's forced to play that style of game. And again, like you mentioned, is he fit for a top pair role? I'm not quite sure. I mean, sure, it will be better than Ryan Lindgren. I mean, anything's an
Anything's
upgrade
better than
there,
Ryan Lindgren.
but like I agree with you that they need to find the long term solution. Like this can't get to the Mets DH level of things where you're just swapping guys out every year and plugging and playing, seeing what works.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like Gavrikov has been getting, he's been in top air minutes because I mean Doughty was out since the start of the season. He got hurt in preseason, so and he's been playing with Mikey Anderson, and I think because last year he played with Matt Roy before he left and went to Washington, so he's at least shown that he's not relying on another defensive partner, that he could play well with multiple defensive partners. So is it? I mean, like, yeah, I agree with you. Is it a question of is he a product of LA? But yeah, it also for me depends on the money, how much he's looking for in free agency.
Yeah, that too. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think when you're comparing just Orlov and Gavrikov, I think Orlov is the safer bet, but I think the ceiling is higher with Gavrikov of what he could be just because one, he's younger, of course, and two, he's also been better this season compared to Orlov. But yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm trying to figure out who that other guy was so that they were linked to outside of those.
Let me check.
I know I put out a pretty like extensive tweet about it if I could just find that. Here we go. I found it. It was Provorov.
Oh, Pro, okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Provorov. That's just me though. I've never been a big Provorov guy, but like I view him more as a second pair guy personally.
But like we were saying with Gabrikov about is he a product of LA system? I mean, to be fair, you could say the same thing about Dmitry Orlov because I mean we do know Rod's system kills offensive players, but defensively we always know that Carolina's a pretty good defensive team. So again, is Orlov could be a product of Rod's system. I mean, I know Orlov's been a solid defenseman for the last couple years. I mean, he was part of the Bruins trade deadline acquisition back in 2023, but I mean, there has been a couple times, to be fair, like, and maybe it's just because I'm not always watching Carolina, but I do see sometimes some shaky plays in Orlov's game. So that's a guy again that I maybe be a little hesitant on to give him a long-term deal at big money.
Let me get back to the chat. Sorry. Thank you for the $2, Jay Lewis. Keandre Miller draft day trade makes best sense. Yeah, I just think that's where it's more realistic to happen personally. Sealer from the Flyers. Nah, I don't know about that. And I don't think Philly's gonna move him either.
Time to move Panarin for a number one draft pick. I mean, I think it is. I think at least I hope in the offseason, and it's still up to Panarin because he has the no movement clause, so he has complete control over it. But I think there is time for a conversation about moving on from Panarin in this upcoming offseason because he needs, not saying he needs a change of scenery, but it's just he puts up the points in the regular season, but as we've seen for the last couple years in the playoffs, he disappears. And if the Rangers want to have this so-called culture change, you need a guy like Panarin off this roster.
Yeah, it's time. It's time to move on from him. And I do feel like it's going to be a little easier to get him to waive than most people are giving credit for because of how many times Drury and him have had conversations about how he's not playing winning hockey enough. But I could be wrong about that. But I'm going to wrap up the stream here. Thank you everyone for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live. If there's any more breaking trades to this magnitude, we'll be live for it. So thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.